Yeah, thank you very much for these kind words, Melanie. It's great to be here. It's great to be back home in Switzerland. And in front of such an amazing audience of creative people, of creators and shapers. I'm talking about design and the circular economy. And yeah, let me start by asking you, so who is familiar with the circular economy? Who has heard it before? Some shy hand raises. Okay, so we have mixed levels here. I'll try to go to both, like giving you a general overview, but then also explaining a bit deeper how I see design in that context. But let me start with a very personal story, because actually 5 years ago I haven't really heard about the circular economy. It was all new for me, This is 2015, January 2015 in Bali. It's Kuta Beach, and so I'm walking on the beach, feeling the sand under my feet, and then feeling some plastics under my feet, and the food wrappers and the sanitary products and the bottles, and I feel this intense kind of sadness, because this is the very beach that I actually learned surfing just a couple of years earlier, and had all these good memories, and being the first time on the board, and feeling a little bit lucky that it actually worked out, and then coming back to the beach and having a good drink, and it was also so good in my memory, so blissful, so yeah, so serene. And then I come back, and just within a few years, it has completely changed. And you know, I kind of knew about waste before, right? But it was never really so into my face so directly. And I think what was the strongest in a way is the feeling of like these waves just coming and bringing more of the waste, really. Like it's kind of minute by minute and wave by wave more. And it's not something you can really clean up, right? You can't just go there and then do a beach cleanup, and then next day you have the same again. So for me, it was really a strong moment of realization, like this is a model that doesn't work. And this is an economy that can't work, and it's not also the future I want to live in. So I was at the very fortunate moment of actually being free to choose my next stage in my career, and I had the chance to join the Ellen MacArthur Foundation just a couple of weeks later. And the narrative of the foundation, it was really inspiring to me, because it was about a positive future. It was about not just doing a little bit less or kind of slowing down the problem a little bit, but actually creating something and shaping something that's really inspiring. And I hope I can share a little bit of that with you today. So clearly, as I've realized, and I think many of us realize that, the current linear model of just taking something and then making something and then disposing it somehow, like we think it's going away, but somewhere it still lands, that's ripe for disruption. So we can't continue like that. And my entry level, and entry point, and I'll use that as a kind of example throughout the presentation, was plastics. So the first project we looked at in terms of applying circular economy principles to a real challenge was plastics packaging. So we looked into the history of plastics, and actually we are now 40 years into history of the recycling symbol. So you would expect that there is some success in terms of making things better and less wasteful. However, we have realized that actually when you add up the numbers, and we did this work together with McKinsey as well, you actually see that it's very linear. So it's just a huge linear flow of taking something, using it very shortly, like wrapping something or a plastic bottle, and then somehow trying to dispose it. Often it leaks into the environment, so actually 32% on a global level are either mismanaged in landfills, so just being on a dump, or are landfill or incinerators. So the large majority is lost. And that's not only a problem, as you have seen on the beach, right? It's also an economic problem. So we lose a lot of really precious materials in a really quick way. And if we continue this model, so in a business as usual scenario, we would be in a world in 2050 where we actually have 4 times the consumption of these resources. We would potentially have more fish, actually more plastics than fish in the oceans, which is it's hard to believe. Like we couldn't believe it ourselves when we first did the numbers, but we went through it again. And also from a carbon perspective, so climate change being a really big societal topic, it would actually multiply by a factor of 15. So already having a lot of other issues with CO2, now we would also use more of that budget in plastics packaging. So you get a sense that very clearly the plastics model doesn't work, but actually it's pretty similar for other material flows as well. So our second pack of research that the foundation has looked into is around textiles and fibers. And also here the numbers are very similar. So we also lose a large share of that in just one cycle. And then looking at other sectors, like food, for example, we see that a lot of food is also being wasted. So 1/3 we lose. Then, and this one I always love because it's kind of like so visual, like the cars. So our cars here in Europe, they are parked 92% of the time. So we actually only use it 8%, and then of course there's also a lot in traffic jams, and we only have like on average 1.5 people per car, even though there's of course many more seats. So somehow mobility is kind of like there's high structural waste and underutilization in that sector. And then also in terms of built environments, so we have a lot of office spaces, like 60%, even during the day, that are not being occupied. So I'm giving you a lot of numbers, a lot of facts, but in the end, I think the message is very clear. The current model just doesn't work. And now the question, of course, is like, what can we do about that? Which brings me to the next point. So what if we actually could have an economy that is prosperous, that creates everything we need, but in a way that's regenerative? What if it could be regenerative by design? And that's kind of like what really inspired me about the foundation, why I wanted to be part of that. And just in a very kind of like simple way, it's basically going from the current take, make, and dispose model to a model that is regenerative by design. So at the very start, we already think about what are we creating, what happens to that after use, right? How does it go back, or what happens with the materials, instead of like trying to clean up the mess once it's there. So that, doing something with waste once we have it. And this is our lovely butterfly diagram that shows that there's actually 2 cycles, really. So there's a difference between the biological cycle and the technical cycle. So we have, of course, in the biological cycles, materials that have been here for 3.8 billion years, right? Like wood, and then you have a lot of like the food and so on. That's all going through that cycle, and it can be very safely returned to the biosphere. So it will take a little bit of time, but it's a very different story from the technical cycle, where we have these man-made materials like plastics, metals, and so on, that you can't just kind of like give back to the biosphere. So here, I think it's really important to design with the loops in mind. And we want to go for, we call them loops, we want to go for the inner loops, because if you go and design something that can be actually repaired or reused or shared, there is a much better use of the embedded labor and the embedded energy and all that goes into a product. So if I can actually, let's say my laptop is broken, right? If I can repair my laptop, it's much better to repair it than actually to take it all apart and then melt everything, recycle everything, and try to recreate it somewhere in China. So trying to go for the inner loops is of course, much better in terms of economy, but also in terms of society. And then recycling as kind of like the last outer loop, which brings things back. And this helps us to decouple from the use of finite resources. So that's one important element. But it also, of course, helps us to reduce the waste and the pollution that we have in the linear economy going out at the bottom. The 3 principles I always like to come back to this thing, because sometimes people say, okay, Simon, this is cool, I like the circular economy, and design for the circular economy is interesting as well, but it's kind of like all a little bit complex, and like, how do I get started, and what is it really? And I always like to come back to these 3 kind of principles of the circular economy. In a nutshell, it's all about designing out waste and pollution. It's about keeping products and materials in use, and also to regenerate systems. And now let me give you a bit more examples of that. And obviously, we are talking about design today. So what is the link between design and the circular economy? What if we could actually redesign things, everything around us, like from products, but also to services and systems for a future? And in the context of design, like, for me, even just 2 years ago, we were at the very start of the design kind of like journey. We as a foundation have done some research around the circular economy, but the topic of design was quite new. And we had the chance to come across IDEO and to work with IDEO since the last 2 years. And I still admire Tim Brown being able to so easily explain the connection between design and the circular economy.
Explaining the circular economy at some level is very simple. Circle. Easy idea, right? We can all picture a circle. And we can also picture a line, right? So the idea that our modern industrial economy was designed around a line that starts by digging stuff out of the ground and ends by throwing stuff away. And somewhere in the middle, there's a point in which you produce something valuable and we, as consumers, buy that thing and use that thing, but then we throw it away. And it makes perfect sense, right? It's a way of going from nothing to something. The trouble is you end up with a something at the end that's of no value but to anybody, and it's filling up the planet, and you've used up those materials. But this idea of like taking that line and kind of bending it round into a circle and saying the stuff that we use to create value for us as consumers, there's no reason why it can't continue to be used. Either that thing gets continued to be used, that product or whatever it is stays valuable, or we take the materials from it and reuse them in some way. I feel better as a designer, I feel better as a member of society if I'm creating things and I'm using things that I can do as much of that as I like, and it's not going to be bad for the planet. In fact, it's going to be good for the planet. It's going to maybe help restore things, not just not damage things. And so that sense of meaning that comes from designing and using and experiencing things that we could do for a long, long time, that everybody on the planet could do instead of just a privileged few, that's a pretty special feeling, and that's the feeling I want to have about everything that we design.
And putting it this way, like to create intentionally, to create things, which can be products, can also be systems, for a future that is positive and that's regenerative by design. I think that's really kind of like the essence of circular design. And the second inspiration I got is from Bill McDonough, and he says that design is the first signal of human intention, and it's kind of like it's in a way so obvious that that intention matters in the design stage, but I still find it very valuable just to come back to that, because in the end, actually we shape everything around us. We shape, this building has been man-made, has been designed by an architect. The screens, the clothes, everything man-made has been intentionally created. So this, coming back to the essence of like, what is our intention in that stage of creation, I think is really valuable, I think. And I feel today, like when we talk about what is our intention, I think our intention definitely is to be very human-centered and to really understand what are the needs. How do I design this clothing for people so that it feels nice? Or how do I design a mobile phone, for example, that is very intuitive to use? So I gave an iPhone to my mom, and she actually found it quite intuitive to use, even though she doesn't like technology at all. So all these things are really nice, and during the use phase, they're very easy for us to use, and we love them. And I think that's really like one big achievement. I really love living in this day and age. It's amazing to be living in this era of having so many things that are here for us and designed very well. I think we are really good at this zooming in and understanding. But the question is, and sometimes I wonder, what if we could actually be really, really good at zooming in and understanding user needs and designing for people, but also zoom out to the bigger view and understand what we create and how that fits actually into the big picture, because clearly it doesn't fit at the moment, right? So how can we combine these two? And I'm not saying I have all the answers. It's more like a question that I find really interesting, like how can we zoom in and zoom out at the same time? And that's, for me, one of the pieces that I've really kind of learned throughout my work with the foundation, and in particular in the new plastics economy work that we have done. So obviously, plastics is a societal challenge, and the system is broken, and clearly no individual actor, as you can see here in the loop, nobody in the value chain can solve it themselves, right? So we have a lot of good intentions and efforts, but a bit in an incremental way. And what we really need is like a systemic approach across the value chain. So what we have done here in terms of like the collaboration and really fostering that is we have brought together the players in a systemic initiative. So we've brought together people from the brands, from the retailers, from the plastics producers, but also from the after-use sectors, recyclers, people who are actually sorting and dividing the plastics into different streams. And bringing these people together actually showed us that obviously it's really important to collaborate, and obviously it's really important to talk to each other and to find standards and to find ways that can work across the whole value chain. Because if we, for example, have standards around what kind of materials and polymers and additives we use in the design of a packaging, then of course the after-use sector can then have the right machinery to sort that out, to recycle it at much better quality, and then of course we can then use that again as a high purity material in the next generation of packaging again. So we can close the loop, and collaboration is really important here. Another example that I found really interesting in terms of like cross-value chain collaboration is this idea of like embedding intelligence. I mean, we heard a little bit from Life as well. Embedding intelligence across the value chain and sharing information about those things that really matter. And I think if you as a recycler or sorting a company know what actually is in a certain product, for example, through a digital watermark, so if your packaging communicates with you and you can actually scan it and you know, it's this, it's PP, polypropylene, and then it doesn't have any additives, so I can use it again for food packaging, then of course we can bring that material back. So communication and collaboration across the whole value chain is really important. I think four mindsets started to emerge, and of course this is by far not exhaustive. There might be many others that are really interesting, and we might actually hear more later also from Marcus about the 9 principles of circular design in IKEA. But on a kind of high level, what we kind of started to consolidate in our work into the circular design guide is these 4 principles of going from a broader view of user-centeredness, so going from an individual user to a broader picture of who else in the value chain actually touches our material. So what happens to it after use? Where does it go? How can we make sure it comes back? Reimagining viability. So typically viability is about what is the business case? Is it economically viable for your organization? And what we see today in this interconnected world is that we can only be successful if we actually make the whole value chain successful. So if plastics packaging as a problem and kind of the leakage of it, the linear symptoms of it, cannot be solved by the whole value chain, then it actually harms the whole society and also the whole industry, because plastics in itself is not a bad material, it's just a system that needs to be redesigned. So reimagining viability means actually growing the cake, so actually putting maybe better materials onto the market that then have more value after use, and then maybe can come back again into your new products. So that if you grow the pie, you also grow your own slice in that. Designing for evolution, I think I don't have to speak too much more about that. I think it was really interesting to hear Life's example of the shoe that gets better over time. So design is never done, and I think many digital designers know that. You always are in beta, so it's the next one. And I think when designing for the circular economy, it's even more important to learn and to get these feedback loops of learning from the usage patterns. So that can be through apps maybe, or it can be through the shoe in that case, because you learn how the people have used it, so that you can actually improve it and then take back the materials and give the same kind of service and address the same need, but without the material waste. And then the last one, I think that is one that wasn't very evident from the start, but doing things in the circular economy and designing for a circular economy requires us to be good storytellers. And storytellers in a sense like to create buy-in from other people. Because typically it was just, okay, I design a product, I do some user research, and then I sell as much as I can. But it was not so much about involving other stakeholders and storytelling to them and getting their buy-in and telling that innovation to others. So it was more isolated. I think now it's much more about finding the right story also to communicate to new stakeholders internally and externally. Just to give here one example, we have seen a a vineyard. And that vineyard has shifted from a very extractive linear model of like using just one grape and then a lot of pesticides and fertilizers, and hence also being quite exposed to fluctuations in the soil quality, to a model that was much more resilient. So a model that actually would have other, that actually today has other streams. So they also have honey, so from the bees, and they have the apples and so on. And that all is interconnected because, for example, the bee play an important role with taking care of the this bad insects, basically, that eat the grapes. And so it's all connected, basically. I'm not really an expert on the vineyard. But it shows that today they're doing really well. They're actually doing better than before. They have now multiple income streams. People want to go and see their vineyard, so because it's a new resilient model. If one season the vine isn't that good, they still sell the honey and they sell the apples. So having this redundant, resilient system is really important. And the narrative element here, which I actually want to touch upon, is that there was like this decrease in profitability first, right? When you shift towards a new model, you don't need to have the full ecosystem and the full resilience. However, this owner of the farm, he took the whole team and brought them to diverse farm already in France. So this biodynamic is called, biodynamic winery. And they have seen there that actually can work. It's a different model. It's difficult to calculate the revenues because it's new streams and sometimes you don't know where the money is coming from yet, but actually can work in another context. And taking people to that journey and telling the story, I think is really important to innovate for a circular economy because things are going to be different. Now I want to give you a bit of a sense of, it's not just Simon liking the idea of designing for a circular economy, but actually pioneers have already embarked on that journey and they have already first results. So I want to introduce to you 6 companies or 6 innovators, specifically again in plastics. Of course, there's great examples as well outside of plastics, but these 6 kind of are close to the introductory picture of like solving that plastics issue. So we had a $2 million innovation prize around, Circular Design Challenge that we have run also together with IDEO. And just to give you very quickly some ideas of what the people have done. We see here first an innovation in terms of delivery model. So what if you could actually get your shampoo or instead of in a big bottle or in a sachet that lands on the beach, actually through a machine. So here you can get the exact amount in a reusable or refillable container, and it works already really well in Chile. So they already have 1,200 shops where they sell the exact amount without the packaging. So you get your shampoo without the packaging. And also, like in terms of delivery models, here we see Miva. And they have really funny videos, by the way, of on the New Plastics Economy website. So you can have a look how their model works. But basically, they use an app to order the exact amount of whatever you need from the producer. Then the producer delivers in reusable, returnable packaging to the shop, your nearby shop. This works at the moment in Czech Republic, not here in Switzerland yet. And then the returnable packaging is going back to the producer. So you have no more single-use packaging, and you have less food waste because you can basically specify. In terms of format design, this is a different story now. How can we do formats differently so we have less leakage? You all know you want to get a coffee. You don't have really your reusable Starbucks coffee mug with you. And then like the lid maybe falls away and it's 2 different materials, it's really hard to recycle. And what Tom has done is he basically took the inspiration of origami folding technique. So an old tradition in Japan, and got rid of the lid. And actually it's not only better in terms of like reducing the leakage and the waste, well this is also fully compostable. It's also better for you because if you actually drop this, and they have some drop tests on YouTube as well, it doesn't spill. So they have this beautiful video of like, somebody drops the traditional cup and it's all over the papers. And this one also is like an innovation in terms of like being better in terms of like use. Same segment, different model is what if you could actually get a reward for returning your reusable cup, for example, in cities like London. This is going to be pioneered in London. So you have a reusable cup. You can go to any of the coffee stores. You give it back, you get a reward. So basically, you don't need to bring your own cup. You can go to any of them. And the full material is being reused again. And now the last two are about material innovation. So what I kind of want to show you here is that circular design or designing for a circular economy can come in many forms and shapes. It can be from redesigning business models and delivery systems to redesigning formats, so 3D formats, as well as kind of innovating materials. And the last two are about seaweed-based packaging. So what if you could actually have your sauce in the burger, or even actually the burger wrapped itself, in a seaweed packaging that you can eat? And both Rodrigo and also David have some interesting ideas around that. And David actually is eating his burger in the wrapper of seaweed itself. And not only are these good in case it would leak, because they're kind of nutrients to the environment, they also are a really helpful contribution to the local societies. So this seaweed is grown in local communities. It's not like a large-scale material flow that's based in the petrochemical industry. So it really helps, you can source the seaweed in multiple locations. And all of these are still at the start of their journey of innovation, but they are now in incubators this year, and having won these prizes, they will get further support in developing their ideas. So different forms and shapes, but all of them touch the three principles of the circular economy. They design out waste and pollution, they keep the products and materials in use, and regenerate natural systems. So for example, the seaweed is actually a nutrient boost if it does leak. So that's an example of the last one. Now bringing it kind of from this more pioneer level to really like every one of us, like what if you could actually redesign everything for a circular economy? How can you use these new ways of designing? And we have good news. This is a free tool that's there for you. So we are a charity, and our charitable mission is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And in particular, my mission is to support you as designers and creators. And this is a free tool that you can all reach online, and it's continuously evolving. So we've launched this together with IDEO 1.5 years ago, and it consists of a quick introduction to the circular economy, then some design thinking methods in the context of the circular economy. So 24 methods that you can use depending on where you are in your design process. So understand, define, make, and release. So you have different methods depending on where you are. And then some practical resources. So for example, if you are a big fan of circular design right now and go home, you can actually just print out the workshop package, take 1 hour, take a team of your people, and then start applying some of these strategies and just play around. So it's very easy to get started. And this is like one of our resources. So you go to the right side of the circular design guide, click on resources, and then you see the circular strategies workshop. And these are just 6 cards that are part of that workshop that help you to innovate and to rethink and to redesign, whether it's a product or a service or a system. And it can range from material choices to modularity, and the list is by far not exhaustive. So we just wanted to give you kind of like a flavor of that, and it's good to see other people being very innovative around new circular design principles. So more and more companies are also publicly sharing their principles, like for example IKEA. And I think that's a really good starting point as well for you to rethink whatever you are designing. Then one thing I just wanted to share with you as well is if you are particularly interested in material choices, we have just launched this week a new tool also on the guide for you to understand how you can make material choices that are both circular but also safe. So sometimes an issue is that we we always want to make sure that what we circulate is also safe for the application. So for example, in plastics packaging, you want to make sure that you don't have any toxic elements from, like, let's say, other plastics that have been not food packaging, right? So using these methods, you can actually understand how to better design and make material choices that are both safe and circular and fit for the circular economy. And then, in the spirit of like democratic design days, one initiative that I find really inspiring and that's emerging right now is a Fab Lab originated movement. It's called Materium. It's a free online platform that helps you to play with recipes. And this is now, if you remember the butterfly diagram in the biocycle, so it's taking local materials like seaweed, for example, and then having recipes and 3D printers and so on to produce everything locally that you want to do in your Fab Lab. And I found this quite powerful, because if you look at nature in a way, I mean, it's amazing how nature manufactures so many high-performing things, right? I'm still, I'm not a chemist, but I'm still amazed, like, how a spider can actually get the spider web so strong, right? Or how a butterfly can have so many colors, but actually it's all the same building block, like it's all the same material. It's just this 3D structure that is different in the butterfly that makes the color. So all of these examples kind of give me the hope that by applying technology, and we have heard that from Michelle before, how quickly that is evolving. By applying technology and using biological building blocks in 3D structures that actually are high-performing, like in the case of a spider web, that we can find really interesting ways to design for the circular economy. So that's another initiative that I find really interesting. And then of course there's the broader shift also in society around new business models. So you're coming now across like companies shifting from products to services. So that can be light as a service, for example, in the case of Philips, or it can be paper wash. So you don't really have to buy a washing machine anymore, but you get actually everything installed. And the good things about both of these things is that when, of course, you as a company take care of the light and the washing machine, you know what's coming back, right? So like you get the materials back. The customer doesn't have to worry about what do you do when the washing machine is broken. But also it helps us to design things better, because of course we can then understand how people are using it. We can design it for durability. So these new business models are really interesting as well. And you find a couple of these on our case studies library. All right, so now let me close by saying that, and I mean this really, like, we are of course very much at the starting point of this. Designing for a circular economy is one of the greatest creative challenges of our times. It's definitely not easy. I might come across as pretty excited about this idea, but I also do know it's a long journey. I want to say that you're in good company. So it's happening. We see many universities leading this work. We see many companies, like IKEA, for example, being really ambitious towards a circular economy. So it is happening. And yeah, please also feel free to join a small emerging, a humble emerging prototype on LinkedIn, which is our current circular design community. So we have there people exchanging ideas around circular design, helping each other, sharing free resources, and so on. So that's all open and free for you. I would love to end the presentation with one of my favorite quotes. And Bucky said, we are called to be the architects of the future, not its victims. And I think this is really empowering. Like the fact that we are actually able to shape what's coming through intentional design, I think that's what gets me personally really excited about designing for a circular economy. Thank you.